Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Leadership Circle. We're back. It's Tuesday evening, and as you can see, we've got a very special guest with us tonight. I want to thank all of you for attending. JR, great to see you. Deana, always a pleasure. And a man whom I admire, I look up to, and I respect, my brother, Mr. Cortland Warren. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight's conversation, we were discussing different topics and what to speak about, and we thought good combo that we'll jump in on is overcoming adversity, bouncing back from the setback. Deana, go ahead. I'm going to get my page live, and please introduce Mr. Cortland. Roll from there.
Awesome. So yes, we've got Mr. Cortland Warren here with us. So excited. Many of us have had the honor and pleasure of experiencing and witnessing his magic as a facilitator, a thought leader, a mentor, an amazing speaker. Most recently, had a TEDx talk on an elevated talk on race, which was phenomenal. So if you have not heard that, I do invite you and encourage you to go and check it out. But we're super blessed and excited to have you with us here, Cortland. What else do we need to know?
It's first and foremost, thank you. It is a honor, and I appreciate you individually and collectively. Part of me still gets a little weirded out with with the acknowledgments and the accolades, though I understand the spirit with which you say it. And from that place, I'll just say that I'm humbled to have the opportunity. And JR and Deana, Matt, we've worked together extensively, and to know that the Leadership Circle exists, to know that you are men and women who are taking action. It's just an absolute honor to be invited. I will say to those of you who are listening in, my real come from is not from a place of, it's not from a place of guru, not from a place of having done anything that anyone listening could not also or doesn't also do, and perhaps in a bigger way than I have. But the subject of adversity and being able to bounce back is one that I know quite well, not because I teach it, but because I've lived it. The question is asked, often, is there a difference between knowing about something and truly knowing something? And I think we would all agree that there is a difference between knowing about it and truly knowing it. I know about Dubai, though I've never been there, right? And so we can know about a thing and not know a thing. I'm confident, though, that as it relates to resilience, I not only know about it, I know it. And I'm excited about the conversation tonight. I guess as my opening statement on the idea, it's to know that regardless of where you've been and no matter what you've been through, you have within you what it takes to not only bounce back to where you were, but to go further than you've ever been. And, the term post-traumatic growth is what comes to mind for me. And post-traumatic, many people know of the terminology post-traumatic stress disorder. It's, an adversity or a challenge that a person is met with. And because of that particular challenge, they experience the setback, the depression, the guilt, the remorse, whatever it might be. And it is important to note that post-traumatic stress disorder is not only reserved for those who have been in battle. It's not only for those who have fought valiantly in war, for a country. It could also be a person who, during this pandemic, has lost a job. If you're the person who was responsible for caring for your family financially, and that was taken away, that can be a very traumatic experience. It's for the person who's experienced, be it sexual assault or another type of physical assault, that too can be a traumatic experience. The loss of a loved one, which I've experienced recently, that also can be a traumatic experience. And so it's not only reserved for that. So though many people know about post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, not as many people are familiar with PTG, which is post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth is you have, like everyone here has likely had an experience that as you were going through it, it was difficult. As you were dealing with it, it perhaps felt like the most challenging of all things. And you look back on it now and you're grateful for it. And perhaps you wouldn't have it any other way than exactly how it played out. And so post-traumatic growth is the ability to take what you have experienced, and as a result of that, the person, the man or woman that you became as a result of that, you grew from it, and you look back on it and note that if it had gone any other way, you would not be the person that you are. And so what I do know is that post-traumatic growth, or to take traumatic event or experience and grow from it, is not reserved for just a few. It's not those qualities that are necessary for it, and those attributes are not reserved for only the elite. It is a skill. It's a skill that can be developed, and if it can be developed, then it can be mastered. If it can be mastered, then it can be mastered by you. And so I'm excited about those components of tonight's conversation.
Right on. Well, you say it, as you're speaking, Cortland, I think to myself, like, all of the setbacks, in the time when they happen, they don't feel good. They don't feel good. In the moment of it, it feels like I've experienced some of this within the past year of like everything about me, I'm shaking and I'm trying to figure out, why is this happening? What's happening? And it doesn't feel good in the moment. But then, months go by, days, moments go by, and then you can actually look back at it and know that had to happen in order for me to be where I'm at now. And so I guess that kind of opens up a conversation of many of us, I think, have experienced challenges in the past year. What would you say, I think from my perspective and my friendship with you, the resilience, the bounce back, is there any key tips or any, and I know it's different for everybody, but maybe you've got one thing or two things that might be really, you feel key or important to share?
I think first is to understand that the reaction or the initial setback is very normal. It's to be expected, and there's not something wrong with you because something occurs that shakes your foundation. You're not weak because you got knocked down. There's not something that you're missing because you feel a sense of letdown, disappointment, even depression. The first thing to understand is to experience the feeling is the way through it. And oftentimes what happens is, in our desire to be tough, our desire to be, to put on an armor or an exterior that shows that it didn't affect me, is where a lot of people mess up initially. But to allow yourself to feel it is where the growth takes place. I would ask you to bring to mind a small child, and the likelihood is, if you've spent any amount of time around children, and considering that we were all small children, they have a capacity to experience all of the emotions. Sometimes in like 30 minutes, they can experience all of the emotions. And it's because they are perfectly self-expressed that they are able to grow and to adapt as quickly as they are. But if you'll show me a person who doesn't feel, show me a person who doesn't allow themselves to feel, and I'll show you a person who's stuck in their life. And it's likely that something happened whereby they determined that the way to handle it is to not feel anything. But note that when you shut off the feeling, when you numb out, when you turn the feeling off, perhaps that keeps you from being hurt, but it also keeps you from experiencing love. So I may say, well, I'm not going to feel anything, and that will keep me from experiencing disappointment. It'll also, though, keep you from feeling excitement. So when you turn off the feeling, you turn off all of the feeling. The conversation around resilience and being able to bounce back, to me, it begins with a conversation about who you are. And so the second part of that is to remember who you are and of what you're made. So if I'm holding in one hand, if I'm holding a glass, a drinking glass, and in the other hand, I'm holding a basketball, and I drop them both. The glass falls to the ground and it shatters. The basketball bounces. And so the question is, how come? Well, at the very basic level, the glass shatters and the basketball bounces because of the materials of which it is made. And so when it comes to your ability to bounce back, it is important to note what you are made of. And so if we look at the qualities and characteristics of, let's say, a small child and how we come into the world, I think, there's not really any reasonable room for debate on the fact that, the small child is unconditionally loving. The child is trusting. The child is persistent. The child is determined. The child is also trusting. The child is curious. The child experiences excitement. And maybe most importantly, the child has very high levels of self-approval. That's the reason why a child has, no one teaches a child how to be honest. No one teaches a child how to trust. That is innate. It's inherent in all of us. And so when we think about being able to bounce back, it is to be first reminded, or to know, so that you don't need a reminder. It's to know of, of what you are made of. Okay. And there is, if we say, well, those qualities and characteristics that I named, they're not just inherent in some small children, it's in all small children. And so that means that it doesn't matter what country you were born in or where you currently live. It doesn't matter who your parents were or weren't. It doesn't matter what neighborhood you grew up in. It is, all small children is all small children. And so your ability to bounce back is inherent in who you are as a human being. And so essentially by birthright, you have full access to living a joyful and fulfilling life. Now, that doesn't mean that we all get to do the same things. We don't all have the same physical traits, qualities, and characteristics, but as it relates to your ability to live a fulfilling life, you have it within you. And so, the glass breaks because, it's tempered and it was heated at 1800 degrees, and though we're able to drink out of it, it is the stress that is on that material that leads it to break. And so when acted upon by a high degree of resistance, then it shatters. And many people have experienced that, right? And so because their lives are filled with stress, then a particular event, and for lack of, adequate, terminology, we'll say when faced with a certain degree of stress, then it shatters them, it breaks them. The basketball is elastic. And so the materials that it is made with allows it to really galvanize all of its materials when necessary. And so when it is met with this resistance, then it is able to, align that which it is made of, and it allows it to bounce back. So first is to note that you're not wrong for feeling what you feel. Secondly, I would say it is to remember who you are. And when, sometimes, our terminology, we want to separate or disassociate from the terminology, even the term, the letters PTSD, not many people want to acknowledge that, that's something that they deal with, something that they fight against. Well, and I would just say it like this: if you would agree that you came into the world trusting, that you came into the world unconditionally loving, that you were born with the capacity to be honest and persistent and determined, and you now look into your life and you note that in your life, those qualities, you don't live them to the highest degree, then something happened. Something happened where you got to the place where you no longer trust to the degree that you trust. Something occurred where you learn or you conditioned yourself to believe that loving unconditionally was not wise, it wasn't smart, it wasn't safe. And so whatever that event was for you, where you determined that trusting was not a good idea or loving unconditionally was not the thing to do, whatever that event was for you, that for you was a traumatic experience. Now, here's the thing. It could have been traumatic for me, and JR experiences the same event and it's nothing. it happens for me, and Deana experiences the same thing, and it doesn't faze her at all. So it's very relative, okay? It's relative. However, if for me or if for you, that was the event where you stopped trusting, you stopped being honest, you stopped loving unconditionally, then for you, that event was a traumatic event. And if even today, you're not at full capacity as it relates to those qualities, then you're suffering from post-traumatic stress, right? That's the reason why you're not being who you truly are. You're not being your authentic self. And whatever event you can point to as the event where that changed, where it shifted, where you stopped, whatever that event was, for you, that was a traumatic event. That was a traumatic experience. And until or unless you do the work to reshape that or reframe it, then until you've done that work, then you continue to suffer from post-traumatic stress. Okay, now what's great is we will find a way to manage. And the work that I'm involved in, which many of you have experienced, I don't get excited about giving people or sharing with people insights that will lead them to being able to manage their life. That doesn't excite me. That doesn't light me up. And so it's not about just getting back to where you were, but going beyond where you've ever been. And you'll hear people say it when they say things like, the best thing that ever happened to me was losing my job. It was the best thing that ever happened because it forced me to go start my business. The best thing that ever happened was the diagnosis, and I began as a result of that to take care of my health. The best thing that ever happened was losing that relationship. And so it's likely that everyone listening in, you've had times like that. What a lot of people don't get or understand is that skill is, first, it is a skill, and it's one that can be developed, and it starts with one's explanatory style. And we may get to that here in just a moment. But first, you're not wrong for what you felt. You're not wrong for feeling. You're not weak for feeling. And then also it's remembering that you're the basketball, you're not the glass. And because of what you are made of, then you are equipped to bounce back. Does that make sense?
I love it. 100%. Yeah, I love the analogy of the glass and the basketball. Thank you. JR, what were you going to say?
Well, why don't you want to talk about Hydra and anti-fragile at all? I mean, that's one of my favorite concepts. We have a teacher in common, as we all do and stuff. And, or maybe I'll jump into that. You know what?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so Marshall Thurber for me is he's just a light, okay? And so anti-fragile and going Hydra is, you just think about, so for those that don't know the term, right? And I don't say that, I just like to make sure that everybody is included. I don't like to work from, the assumption. But, the idea of anti-fragile, you just think of something being fragile and then something okay, it's not fragile. And, what are the things that would lead a person to, to showing up in life that way. I love it. And then, so go there. I mean, it's this conversation. It really is.
Like one of the things I love about anti-fragile, the concept, it's not so much that you're anti-fragile. It's like when you drop that glass, a lot of people would say, and this is from a book called Anti-Fragile. It's not mine. Mm-hmm. I don't have any original stuff. They just read a lot.
None of us do.
And, but he talks about it's not the opposite of resilient. A lot of people think the opposite of fragile is resilient, and then the concept of anti-fragile would actually be like when you drop that glass and it doesn't break, people would think resilient. But if you drop that glass and all of a sudden that glass became stronger or turned blue or it added value or something like that. And that's what's really great about, the concept of anti-fragile is all these obstacles are for you. And when you get to, I would say, like the mastery level, you realize that everything's for you. All these setbacks, all these challenges are just so we can build our muscles. Yeah. And then it's kind of fun to get to a point where it's like, oh, what am I supposed to learn from this, as opposed to why, again, we start to get to
I think the faster a person can get to that place, JR, is the closer you can, the faster you can get to the place of this event or experience is not happening to me, it's happening for me, the closer you are to self-mastery, right? The closer you are to mastery, what the hell? Why am I having to deal with this? And that's always been like a question for me. Like if I, the different people, innocent maybe, but when a person says, man, oh, I'm so glad that I didn't have to deal with that. I'm so glad that that wasn't me. I think that's spoken from a very immature place, right? It's as though, it's not that I'm wishing it upon someone else, but to note that whatever, as I look at responsible, it's the idea that no matter where I've been and no matter what I've been through, what comes next is up to me. So to your point, anti-fragile would not be, okay, dropping the glass and it doesn't break, because then it's plastic and it's not glass, right? It's, okay, so now how then do I respond? Or what can we do with broken glass? Okay, what can I create out of broken glass? That is anti-fragile. That is the resilience. It isn't to say, well, I didn't go through that experience, or to rewind and that thing never happened. It's more of who did I become in the process? And so absolute responsibility is really what we're speaking about. And I remember, basic math principles, fundamentals. I remember very vividly when the term absolute numbers was introduced, and there we were. It seemed like for a week or two we were working on the number line. You remember that? We're working on the number line, and then is the number positive or negative? I'm way back, early school days, right? So is the number positive number, negative number? To the right of the zero, it's positive. To the left of the zero, it's negative. How many spaces is it from zero to the left or right? And then once you kind of got the whole number line idea figured out, then it was like, Miss Risley was my school teacher at that time. Then she introduces this idea of absolute numbers. And so all of a sudden we were working on is it positive or negative? And then it was like, in this lesson plan, it was like, well, forget positive or negative. It's how far is it from zero? That's all we care about. How far is it from zero? How many spaces from zero? That's the absolute number or the absolute value. So what I'm talking about is a person's mindset of no matter where I've been, no matter what I've been through, no matter the mistakes or failures I've experienced, what comes next is up to me. That's anti-fragile, because now, because I love myself unconditionally, there's not anything that you can present me with that I don't believe I have the capacity to overcome.
Yeah, I like that. And Jay, I appreciate you bringing that up too. I was interested in hearing what his response may be, or his opinion. Now, you mentioned something that, and you've said this to me before and may have said it to other people, but it's not wrong for feeling. And I wrote that down and I remind myself that, and thank you for sharing that, because my experience in this past year is I've had moments where I am feeling like questioning myself, or a setback, or like, whatever the feeling of question or doubt or frustration. But then I have a hard time when I'm in it, like asking myself, and I appreciate you sharing, I think I'm answering this for myself, is how could I let myself be feeling this? I already know what comes next is up to me. And so why am I sitting in this place of frustration? But it's important, I think, what you may share next is like experiencing the experience wholly, really with the sadness, the frustration, the confusion, or whatever the feeling is to really sit with that in order to move forward into what comes next is up to me. But I had a hard time with in the past 3 to 6 months of like actually questioning, like, I already know this. I'm in a mindset and studying mindset quite often, but I'm in a confusing depression state of frustration. So let me ask it like this, like, so
let me ask you though, but when you were in that, like,
yeah.
So you had the feelings of, what you were dealing with, but then the part where you're starting to like question yourself and like, man, I know better than allowing myself to feel this. I know I shouldn't be feeling this way. How do you feel about yourself in that, in the questioning and in the doubting? How did you, how did you feel?
I felt like I knew better than to sit and soak into it,
Mm-hmm.
because what I was feeling was like, I'm choosing this.
Okay. Okay. So then that whole idea of like, man, Matt, you know better. Okay, you know better than this. Like, come on, like what the hell, right? You invest in your personal development. You know, you study. You know, you're part of the leadership circle. Like, you cannot, you know better than this. You know better is all, you know, is equivalent to me as, you know, shame on you. Shame on you for feeling this. Shame on you for allowing yourself to even be in this place. And you know, shame is not on the path to transformation, right? It's not on the path. And so if you're listening in, you know, and JR, you'll relate to this. You know, it, like, go if you're writing things down, probably maybe go like to the center of your page, and because and just write the word blame, right? Because typically what happens when things don't go our way, or we don't like the way that it has gone, when things don't happen the way we wanted it to happen, then typically what happens first is a person will look to blame. Like, whose fault is it that this has happened, right? And who's the reason? And usually that person is outside of me. Then when blame doesn't work, then, okay, I look around and I run out of people to blame. Then it's shame. So above the word blame in the center of your page, write the word shame. And usually what's happening there is, okay, I've run out of other people to blame, and now I got to look at myself. All right. So, okay, you know, it's my fault. I did it. I'm the reason it happened. You know, it's on me. I'm the business owner. And so ultimately, you know, the buck stops here. And so a lot of times, though, when a person is in shame, what they will look to do is I'll come to Deana and I'll say, well, you know, and if I can convince Deana that I feel bad enough, then I can get a little bit of sympathy and attention from Deana, and she will likely, you know, console me, and, you know, it's going to be okay. It's all right. It happens to everybody, whatever. Okay. So, but eventually, Matt, we get to the place where we're tired of shaming ourselves. Okay. So blame didn't work. Shame doesn't work. And then if we don't stop it there, then we move into the third level above that, which is justification. Okay, so now we have to justify why it happened, and maybe, you know, it was because of the pandemic, or, you know, everybody else isn't as tough as I am. Not everybody else has what I have, you know, in order to handle it. And so we look to justify this situation or outcome. And so you have blame, shame, justification, and then just draw a horizontal line above the word justify, and above that is the word responsible. And so what I would ask you to look at is, okay, how much money do you actually make when you live in the place of blame, shame, and justification? None. How healthy are your relationships when you're spending time in blame, shame, or justification? So a simple way to understand it, okay, and a way that could actually, you know, revolutionize companies and bring passion and love and inspired connection into your relationships, is to determine that you're not going to live below the line. Below the line is justification, shame, and blame, and we're going to move from responsible. Now, sometimes people, they hesitate to embrace the idea of responsible because of their definition of it, and responsible usually implies fault, who's the reason, who's, you know, the culprit for why this happened. And that's where we just insert again the absolute responsibility, which means what comes next is here. Okay, so but then it also just kind of leads me to an idea that is really a myth in personal development. Okay, this idea of completely eradicating yourself of limiting beliefs. It's a farce. Okay, it doesn't work. However, you can sell a lot of seminars that way. Frankly, you can sell a lot of books that way. It's just not real life. Okay, and so this idea of, well, because I've attended the courses, because I have, you know, read the books, you know, because I'm a part of the leadership circle, then these are feelings that I should not be feeling, then you're frankly in resistance, which is pausing your progress, okay? And so to note that that idea of I shouldn't feel a particular way is just not real life, okay? And we don't get to get rid of all limiting beliefs. Our feelings are actually essentially a compass. They're a signal. And there's a difference between noise and a signal, okay? So, you know, noise irritates. Noise, we want it, you know, to shut up. Noise, we want to quiet it, okay? And so a lot of times what you may be interpreting as noise going on through those conversations internally, what if it wasn't noise, but you saw it as a signal? And that signal is there to get us back into balance. It's to balance out our perspectives, okay? And so the law of polarity says that for anything to exist, then its opposite must also exist. You do not get to have one without the other. You just, for anything to exist, the opposite must exist also. And a lot of things we wouldn't know if it were not for the experience of the opposite. And so our appreciation per day is because we've been through a lot of nights. Our, you know, the ups we celebrate because of our experience in the downs. We wouldn't know what left was if there wasn't a right. We don't get in without out. And so a lot of times those internal conversations, if we will listen to them as signals, are being used to get us back into balance, which grounds us, and then we're able to move forward from there.
That's awesome, Cortland. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm wondering though, so a lot of it, I mean, it's all jewels and I appreciate it. And how can, like, let's say, how can we notice it more? What's something tangible, or maybe just, you know, something tangible that can be done almost to serve as that reminder, or to put us on that trajectory for, you know, living above the line, coming from responsible and embracing the growth that can.
Got you. Okay, I think I understand your question. And so it's a, well, first, the feeling is important. You know, so I usually speak in, it's almost like I build a case. You know what I mean? And so it's like, this is connected to this, which is connected to this, which is connected to that. So the feeling, very important, okay? And so now once I notice what I'm feeling, or I receive the signal, okay, then it becomes, all right, now how do I transition out of it more quickly? So to JR's point, right, how do I get to that place of recognition that it's for me? How do I do that faster? Which is what the masters are able to do. And it really comes down to, and this is Martin Seligman, to your point earlier, JR, about, you know, nothing really being new. Martin Seligman is the head of the positive psychology department at the University of Pennsylvania, who thought that really personal development and was BS, right? And so he started to study it. And what he really wanted to know was, can a person truly change his life or her life? And what he, through his research, first thing that he found, which is not a very popular statement, before I say it, it's not very popular in personal development circles. What he first uncovered was that affirmations, there's no real evidence that they even work. Okay, so if I make a statement that is not true of me, then my current identity or self-image will reject that affirmation. And so that may answer for some of the listeners why affirmations aren't working if you're only using affirmations. And so what Dr. Seligman did in his research team, they took mice. Now, for my loving, you know, people who are, you know, loving animals, to my knowledge, no animals were hurt in the experiment. Okay, but what he did was they took mice, and, you know, just imagine, you know, your stereotypical mouse in a maze, and they put cheese in an area of the maze, and the mouse was able to eventually figure out the route to the cheese. Pretty simple. Once the mouse had gone that particular route a few times, let's say, then what they did was they put a barrier between they put a barrier that would actually block the cheese. So essentially, they changed the route to a degree, okay? And what they noticed was that that mouse would run that route, would repeat the route, and it knows now that the cheese is just on the other side of this barrier that has now been introduced. The mouse could smell the cheese. It knows that the cheese is there. It's run that route a few times, and I'm getting there, Deana. It has run that route a few times, and what they noticed was that the mouse would eventually, because it couldn't get to the cheese, the mouse would eventually give up. Okay, so you could basically condition or teach the mouse helplessness. It would eventually get to the place, I'm done, there's nothing I can do, it's over. That wasn't the end of the experiment. That wasn't what Dr. Seligman wanted to know. What he wanted to know was, can you, after getting the mouse to the place of helplessness and giving up, could you get the mouse back to a place where it was running again? And that was the whole experiment, which is basically the subject of this Zoom, is the bounce back. And through the research and what they were able to eventually do was get the mouse back to the place where it was running again, like re-inspired to go find the cheese. As that relates to human beings, okay, what that came down to, more so than affirmations, the key, here's a practical tool that a person can use to be more resilient and bounce back. The key was an individual's explanatory style. Explanatory style. So how do you explain to yourself the event that has just happened? How do you do that? And it comes down to 3 P's, okay, 3 P's. And so this is what you want to remember as you are in that place of, being knocked down or your foundation has been rocked. The first P is personalization, okay? And so what he found was that highly resilient people do not take things personal. Whereas those who suffer, let's say the glass being shattered, the trauma just knocks them out and they never bounce back, it is because they take it personal, meaning whatever this thing is that has happened, they feel like it has happened to them and only them. Perhaps there's a belief in a higher power or an esoteric being who has it out for them, and for some debt that, a misunderstanding of what karma really is, but some karmic debt that I did not pay, and it's finally caught up to me, and this is the reason why I'm dealing with it. And so they take the adversity or challenge very personal, whereas those who are highly resilient, they don't. They see adversity and challenge as being something that everyone deals with, and so it just happens to be my turn, right? I oftentimes say that adversity visits everybody, and so our job is to make sure that adversity remains a visitor and not a roommate, okay? So they experienced it as not something that's personal, but it occurs to everyone. The second P is permanence, okay? And so highly resilient people see obstacles and challenges as something that's only temporary, while those who don't have the skill developed, they see it as, it's always going to be this way. They don't see a way out. So the permanence, the time that it's going to be there. Highly resilient, high achievers, like people listening into this, are people who see it, more like a bump in the road. This is just something temporary. We got to get it together, and we will, and we'll be fine. So the first P is personalization. They don't take things personal. The second is permanence. They see it as something that's only temporary, not long lasting. And then the last P is pervasiveness. So some people, when they are challenged, then they tend to make one area affect all areas. So for example, a person has a flat tire at the start of their day, and they determine that, man, my entire day is now ruined. Well, and you may look into your life and note that it wasn't that you had a bad day. You had a challenge early on that you ruminated on for the rest of the day. So they don't allow it to spread everywhere. Okay, so they don't allow the adversity to become cancerous. Okay, it's not pervasive. It's not. They don't have it spread to all the other areas. And so one of the things that you want to do is you want to be a person who acknowledges and celebrates your accomplishments and achievements. Because if you're a person who never celebrates your wins, then when the inevitable adversity comes, then you won't muster the courage to celebrate and acknowledge what you are doing well. And so those 3 P's is what is referred to as your explanatory style. So a very specific and practical tool is to not take it personal, to not allow it to be pervasive, and recognize that it's not permanent, it's only temporary. So the three P's is a practical way to remember it. And if you can shift that quickly, then it doesn't have the same debilitating effect.
That's great. I want to take that somewhere. And so when you bounce back, right? And so in part of bouncing back, and I'm going to tie this to a couple of things. I'm going to do my best to kind of simmer a little bit like you without as much experience. And so we get the reward. I mean, so basically we're bouncing back, something happens, and connecting with the knowing and not doing. Like you've said, what we know is less as important as what we do. And I know all these right things to do. I have the answers, but do I have the discipline to actually do it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I was thinking, like, what is the key? How do you actually get this to happen? And I was thinking there needs to be a why or some form of a reward. So there's some incentive internally or something.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Or
my thought is you're absolutely correct.
All right.
My thought, you're absolutely correct. It's a person, from the place of taking action. And I don't want to, the format. I mean, you guys open it. You give a guy that speaks for a living opportunity to speak, I'll just go. So you got to just jump in. However, it's like this. When it comes to why we take action, okay, why we don't do the things that we know to do, okay. Action really taking action or not really comes down to at a very basic, primordial level. We only act for one of 2 reasons, pleasure or pain. That's it. Pleasure or pain is the only reason why we act, okay? So from a self-awareness standpoint, an individual must know of herself or of himself. They must know, am I a pain person or am I a pleasure person? Neither is more effective than the other. Obviously, not one is right and the other wrong. But you've got to know what inspires you to move. For some people, it's the pleasure. It's the why that you're speaking of, okay? But even that why is pleasure or pain. So if I'm a pleasure person, then I will move and take action because of the promise of what's to come. I will take action because of the dream that gets fulfilled. I will take action because of whose life improves because I improve. And so it's the grand prize, let's call it, that is out there. And so for some people, they are inspired forward because of the promise of a greater future. They are a pleasure person. Then there are those who are pain people. And so for them, they won't move until the pain is too great. And so for that individual, then they must look at the prices or what is the cost of inaction. There is a cost for inaction. To not do anything, there is a price that is associated with that. And so unless you want it to require a traumatic event to get you backed up against the wall and now you're in motion, you could be more, you could take greater initiative and look at, okay, well, what are the prices that I pay for what are the prices that I pay for not building my business to the level that it could be? What are the prices that my children pay? What is the price that my husband, my wife, or my partner pays? What are the prices that my community pays if I don't do the thing that I know to do? And so by looking at the prices, then what can happen is that price, when you land on a price that is too great, then you'll move into action. But from a self-awareness standpoint, it is, am I a pain person or a pleasure person? If I'm a pleasure person, then I got to imagine the possibilities. If I'm a pain person, then I got to look at what is it costing me to remain where I am.
Michael Jordan always picked a grudge or found something to hold on to so he can go and whoop their butt, and he found that why.
Yes.
Oh, and it's finding that why. So do you think he was embracing pleasure or pain with that? You know what I mean? Because I find that why is what gets me, and the why needs to keep growing, and that allows magic to happen. And the why.
Yeah, he wanted to be. That's it. And what we know, like every, my I feel like my mission, part of my purpose, is to demystify greatness. Too many people have bought into the idea that it's reserved for only a few, and it's not. It's not. It's not just reserved for a few. So once you know what it is, like I know I'm a pain person. Painting the picture of what's possible really doesn't inspire me nearly as much as the pain of or the inconvenience of where I am. Now, part of that is my upbringing. Part of that is growing up with very little, and so you can't threaten a person who's never had anything. You don't scare them with with the threat of what they're going to lose, because they never had anything. So not having anything, I'm like, everything right now is extra anyway, right? So everything right now is gravy. So so when you say to me like, oh, you're going to take this from me, it's not okay, right? So the for me, pleasure isn't the goal point, though I have friends that for them, it's what I can purchase, it's what I can buy, it's what I can have, it's how I'll be remembered, so forth and so on. And that inspires them. So again, it's not right or wrong. I just know for me, from my own self-discovery and levels of awareness, I'm a pain person. I've got to look at the prices that I'm paying. Okay. So best thing for me, pandemic, right? I'm out, I'm traveling 175 days a year. I'm out with live audiences. I'm speaking to people, and I'm very comfortable. Some might say too comfortable. All of that gets stripped away. I don't like it. I'm a little pissy about it. I don't like, not being able to give you a hug after we finish this call. I don't like that. Okay. So I'm in resistance to what is. And then finally, it's like, okay, well, you'll be not only you're in resistance. And then soon, if you don't do something, you're going to not only be in resistance, you're going to be very hungry. Okay. You may starve to death, Cortland, unless you go do something. So now the pain of staying where I am is like, all right, I've got to reinvent, I've got to grow into something more. Okay. And so these, be it, pandemic or relationship ending or bankruptcy, whatever it is, just know what it is that inspires you into action, pain or pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Cortland. Jared, thank you for leading that in. I want to thank you for your time. I want to keep our agreement too. We asked for 45 minutes, and you're right, man. We could sit here and talk with you. Hopefully we come back for another round with you in the near future, but I want to say thank you.
This is my jam. This is my jam right here. I love it. I love it.
Right.
I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we appreciate you. We're here every Tuesday at the Leadership Circle. We've got a new page up. We put a post out there. So for those of you watching this, we want to say thank you for taking the time to jump in. I want to say thank you both to JR, Deana, to Cortland, to all of you guys. This is the Leadership Circle. We're going to be here every Tuesday, every week, having conversation, interesting dialogue, thought leaders coming in. Cortland, my man, thank you. I appreciate you.
I love, and I don't know who's listening because we're not able to see them. And I unabashedly say that I love the three people that I can see on the screen. I love you. I appreciate you, JR, Deana, Matt. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the invitation. And when I get invited again, you'll know it because I'll be honored. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoy your night, Cortland. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next Tuesday. JR, Deana, you got anything to throw down? We good?
Say we love you all. Thank you. Peace, blessings, aloha. Live, love.
Yeah, be sure to share the Leadership Circle with other people, right? So pay it forward because the circle is only getting bigger. JR, go ahead.
No, yeah, just share it with your friends. You want to spread love, spread aloha, and just to say Cortland's one of my heroes, my mentors, and it was cool to have him on the show. And we'll do our best to get some cool guests. And when we say cool, we mean people that are doing something out there, working on making the world a better place. Yeah. And I think that's all of our goals. And so peace, love, and be the change you want to see in the world. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.